We are continuing on in our Love Is series. I got the privilege of kicking the series off a few weeks ago, but then Heather, my wife, and I went on vacation for 2 weeks to the Alps in Europe. So we hung out in Switzerland, France, and Italy for about 12 days, had an amazing time, and now we're back, and we're in the fourth week of Love Is. And it's interesting, we're talking about love, and Heather and I get off the plane in the States, and we're kind of like, did something happen while we were gone this week in our country? So the first day of football practice was Wednesday, and I go up to Coach Prince, who's a current events teacher here at the high school, and I was like, Coach, I haven't even had a chance to check it. Did something happen while we were gone? And he was like, you're kidding, right? And I was like, no, everything was like in German, and I didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden he tells me the events, and I go on and the internet and see kind of what goes down, and you're just like, man, I thought we were past all this. I thought we were beyond all of that. And it's kind of hard this morning, honestly. It's like, hey, 1 Corinthians, let's talk about love when these types of things are still going down in our country. And I don't know, sometimes, I don't know if you feel like me, I'm just going to be vulnerable with you a second. You feel like, man, maybe we were just fooling ourselves the last 10 years thinking we'd all gotten beyond that. And then all of a sudden we realize there's still so much hatred in our culture. So much prejudice in our hearts in this country, and it just feels like, man, I thought that had changed. I thought we had changed about that. And today it's just kind of like I feel this tension in my heart, which is probably a good thing for me to really go, okay, we're going to talk about love in a week that, one, we need to hear about it, but two, really difficult to talk about it when what went down went down. And we have people in our country, there's more questions than there are answers now, and I think we have a generation that's like, is this really our country? Are we really growing up still in all of this? This feels like books I read a long time ago, in middle school, and now these things are still happening. And how do we embrace this? And how do we help make change? And what do we do as a generation? And I feel like that maybe that God would unite our hearts as His church. See, we didn't come here today to have church. We are His church. And maybe this morning, on a week like we've had, that maybe Jesus would unite us, unite our families, unite our backgrounds, our maybe even differing beliefs, our different races, our different cultures, and God would unite us, and we could at least take some steps forward to lead the way and to say, hey, we're gonna show the world what it looks like to love. Regardless of skin color, regardless of how I grew up or where I grew up, regardless if I was born in this country or not, that God would choose to use us, His church, to say, maybe we need to lead the way. And maybe it starts with this generation right here, because it seems like we're not figuring it out. So maybe this generation needs to start to lead the way and say, hey, we're gonna show this country and this world what does it look like to love. And Paul wrote a letter to a city called Corinth, where the idea of love was just all out of whack. Love was just kind of this word that was just thrown around, kind of like it is today. Kind of like, I love Snapchat. Kind of like, this is mine, I love beef jerky. That's mine. If you want to become my friend, a bag of beef jerky is all it takes. I love beef jerky. But we throw the word love around. I love ice cream. I love that show. I love whatever. And in a world, in a culture in Corinth, like here in the west side of Seattle, we don't understand what love is all about. And then with the events of this last week, it really starts to go, man, how do we love? And Paul kind of writes this letter to a very confused young church in a very confused city and culture. Like, this is what love truly is. And he writes a part of scripture that may be very familiar to your ear. Maybe some of you have never heard of it, but if you've been to a wedding or a vow renewal or something like that, you may have heard this scripture. It's going to come on the screen together. I'd like us to read it together. Would you do that with me? It goes like this. Let's say it together. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. You read that and you go, okay, maybe what I've been thinking love is, or how I use that word, has been kind of off, because I read that and I just go, what is that? How do I experience that? This is not something that I'm all that familiar with. It's because I start to read these things and I go, is love that? Because a lot of times I think love is an expression. Love is some expression I get to be a part of, or love is an emotion, something I get to feel. But I read that and I go, it's so beyond that. And especially if I do something like I take out the word love and I put another word in there. It's a really dangerous word. It's the word Peter. It's my name. And I say, Peter is patient and kind. Sometimes. Peter is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Some of you might think, that's pretty much Peter. Oh, you haven't seen me at my worst. He does not demand his own way. You put the remote in my hand, you'll find out. He's not irritable. He keeps no record of being wronged. No record of being wronged. Just say the words Pittsburgh Steelers to me, and I tell you about records of being wronged and referees who don't know how to ref the game. Records of being wronged. He does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. I still don't know if Deflategate has ever been resolved, and I still have issues with the Patriots. Okay, I don't know. I'm not living this out. Peter never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, endures through every circumstance. If I'm honest with you just for a second, I've been in ministry for about 20 years. And I've never, ever thought about doing something else until about the last year and a half. And to be honest with you, there have been moments, it hasn't been a lot, but there have been moments where I've thought to myself, maybe I should just do something else. This is too tough. This hurts too much. This isn't worth it. So Peter never gives up, never loses faith, always endures through every circumstance. That doesn't feel right. So I got to take my name out of there. Instead of putting love back in there, why don't we put what the definition we're really going to talk about today, the real definition of love, because it's not an expression, it's not an emotion, it's not an ideal, it's a person. So we take my name out of there and we say, Jesus is patient and kind. Jesus is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. He does not demand his own way. In fact, he humbled himself to a death on a cross. He is not irritable and keeps no record of being wronged, like when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices when the truth wins out. Jesus never gives up. He never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That's the definition of love. It's not a feeling. It's not an expression. It's not just some idea or ideal. Love's a person. And we need to start living that out. Jesus led the way in saying, I will embody love. I will lead the way in defining love by how I respond to humanity. He gave his life for us, the cross. He endured all of that for you and for me to show this world what true love is really all about. And today we're going to focus on the last portion of this scripture. And when you look at it, it seems so false. How many of you have ever or are currently preparing for the SAT exam? Anyone ever prepared for the SAT exam? Anyone, is that in your near future? Anybody here? Near future coming up. So there's these giant books that you get that prepare you for the SAT, and they're very overwhelming. And you get ready for it, you start reading it through, and they give you all these pointers and all these tips on how to take this test. And there's one portion of it that says, now in this one section of the test, you're going to look at some answers, and you have to choose from some different answers. And if those answers use specific words, chances are they are false. And it's usually words that are kind of extreme. They're kind of words that, they're absolute. If there's an answer that says never, always, every time, beware of those answers, because most likely those answers are false. They're not true. And then you look to the end of this portion of Scripture, and you look at what words Paul uses, and it's hard in our cynical culture, and even a culture that's been taught there are no absolutes, to read stuff like love never gives up. How could that be true? Never gives up? Come on, never? Love never loses faith. Not even a little bit. Just for a moment, for a second. Never loses faith. Is always hopeful. Well, there's got to be a moment where it's like, I don't got that much hope right now. Love's just like, yeah, you know what? Not right now. And always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. Even that one. Even the one I'm going through. Every circumstance in our cynical, no absolutes culture. It seems like Paul is maybe just using a literary tactic and not actually telling the truth. He's overstating something. But when we look at the work and the person of Jesus, we know he's absolutely telling the truth, because Jesus never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every single circumstance. And today, through that lens, looking at love being defined as the work and person of Jesus, I want you to write this big idea down. If you're taking notes today, write this down. Real love never quits. Real love never quits. Now, there's times you and I have experienced when love quits, when it's quit on us, when we've quit on it, on one another, we've abandoned each other, we've betrayed each other. There's been all of those moments where it feels like love, for sure, Peter, quits. But through this lens of Jesus being our definition of what true love is, real love never quits. But what usually begins to bring question marks or questions that idea, if you take that last portion of Scripture, we're going to go in reverse skate. We're going to go in reverse order and realize that, let's look at those circumstances. So when it says it endures through every single circumstance, usually our wavering on does real love quit begins there with our circumstances. I didn't get accepted to that. They left me. I didn't get to fulfill that dream. I was abandoned. All of those circumstances in our life that begin to all of a sudden not pan out. The dreams of our life don't exactly get written like we thought. The script of our life seems like it's totally wrong. And the circumstances of our life begin to dictate whether we have a give up or not. Because if real love never gives up, but then all of our circumstances start to spiral out of control, what do we do? And our circumstances that begin to spiral out of control, they directly affect our hope. Love never loses, is always hopeful, endures through every circumstance. But when our circumstances begin to spiral out of control, we're not always hopeful. We begin to really kind of question, how much hope is there? Could we really recover from this? Could there be healing? Could there ever be restoration? Could that be restored? Because my circumstances tell me no. And I begin to lose so much hope and to believe that anything could be different than it currently is. And when our hope begins to be shaken, truly shaken, and you've been there when you're in a circumstance or a situation where you feel like there's no hope. Ever said that in your life? There is no hope. This is hopeless. It is void of all hope. When we actually get to that place, when we are void of the hope in our lives, it begins to shake our very faith. You see, because our faith rests upon the fact that I don't exactly see a way forward. I can't actually see this thing changing, but my faith tells me that I'm going to trust that God does. That's faith. Faith is based upon things we don't see. It's things that we hope for. Faith is the evidence of things we cannot see. It's the things that we hope for. But when our hope has been shaken, what happens to our faith? And all of a sudden our trust that God, even though I can't see a way, that God might have a way, if that begins to be shaken, and all of a sudden our circumstances are spiraling out of control, we're losing a grasp of hope, our faith begins to get shaky, then all of a sudden there becomes a give up that we might grab a hold of. There might be a give up in our life. And today, we want to go back to the fact that if love truly never gives up, love never loses faith, is always hopeful and endures through every circumstance, the only way that could be true is if we take the word love out and we put the word Jesus in, because it's found in a person today. That Jesus never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful and endures through every single circumstance. Because if love is an ideal and we read that, we just go, well, we know that's not true. If love is an emotion and we read that, we just go, false. I learned that in SAT preparation. False. No way. But it's found in Jesus, then we can all of a sudden say, maybe it never gives up. Maybe it never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. So we're going to look through those 4 things today and talk about, if we see it through the lens of who Jesus is, maybe this statement that Paul writes to this church in Corinth is for real. The first thing is this, write it down. Love endures through every single circumstance. Love endures through every circumstance. Read that for a second, because this is what we think it means. I can read that, and my brain can translate it. I read that and go, love endures through every circumstance. You know what that means? It means Jesus changes all of my circumstances, and he makes them all great. That's what that means. Because if I'm a person of faith, it means God changes all my circumstances because I said yes to Jesus, and it's all good. But when you read that, it doesn't say that at all, right? Love endures. Love wrestles. Love scratches and claws and gets through, endures every single circumstance. And the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead lives inside of you, makes that possible. That love endures through Jesus endured through every circumstance and went straight to the cross for you and for me. And because he led the way, and that same Spirit that didn't just leave him in the grave, rose him from the dead, lives inside of you, means that we too can endure every circumstance as we walk with Jesus, because he endures it with us. I love what Colossians says. It says, how do we do this? How do we endure? Let your roots grow down into him, into Jesus, and let your lives be built on him. Not on the concepts of this culture, of this world, not on the ideals of everybody else. Let your lives be built on him. Your roots are going down into him, and then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. And that strength of faith will be able to help you to endure when those circumstances begin to spiral out of control. Every summer we have some students who do an apprenticeship. It's called our summer apprenticeship. And this year our students read a book together called Do Hard Things. It's a book written by students to students. And I love a couple of these quotes that are from the book. This first one says this: what is possible when a generation stops assuming that someone else will take care of the brokenness in the world, or that someone else will capitalize on current opportunities, and realizes that they are called to take action? Written by students to students. What is possible when a generation stops assuming, somebody else will get it, and go, no, it's ours. It's ours to get it. That's why I put that challenge out there after this last week. Because maybe it's not this generation that's going to get it figured out. Maybe it's yours, and it's you saying, I'm going to stop assuming that mom and dad's generation is going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. It's going to stop with us. Another quote. Great faith. I hate this quote. This is like a really bad quote because it's really great. Great faith is the product of great fights. Great testimonies are the outcome of great tests. And great triumphs can only come out of great trials. I hate that. Come on. Why can't I just have victory because I'm just great? Because isn't life good and I'm #blessed, right? Why can't it just be, why do we got to go through trials? Why do we got to go through tests? Why do we have to have great fights in order to be able to experience these things? students writing to students, a younger generation writing to a younger generation saying, sometimes it's the trials that allows you to get to triumphs. It's the tests that allows you to have that great testimony and those great fights that build great faith inside of us. Sometimes we have to endure the circumstances for us to believe that love wins. And what if in all of this, when it comes to enduring through every circumstance, that our prayer was changed from, God, change my circumstances, to Jesus, grow me through them? That's my prayer for Ethan, for Lily. I mean, sometimes in my foolishness, I pray, God, just keep them safe and protected and isolated and never let anything bad ever happen to them. But as their parent, I need to be able to say, God, when it doesn't work out, when they fail, when the world comes against them, grow their character. Give them strong legs to stand upon, even when the storms blow, even when like all of their peers aren't with them. Grow their character so that they can stand and endure through every circumstance. See, our prayer really needs to be, Jesus, be with me. God with us. God for us, so I can get through my circumstance. Don't just change my circumstances. My character is not grown or changed at all if all my circumstances were just miraculously just changed all the time. God, walk me through it. Grow my character, grow my heart, make me more like you. The second thing is this, love is always hopeful. Love is always hopeful. That there's hope. That Jesus, there's an enduring hope found in him. Real quickly, I told you we went on a trip to Europe, and Heather, for my 40th birthday, said, I want to take you on a trip anywhere you want to go. And I said, anywhere, or like Yakima or Spokane? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, and she goes, anywhere. We got miles we've been saving up for years. We had never used them, so anywhere. And so I had a few trips kind of on the list. A couple of them were in the wrong season when it comes to good weather, so I chose, let's go to the Alps. Let's go to Switzerland. There's a trek around the tallest mountain in Europe called Mont Blanc. There's a Tour de Mont Blanc. You can take a 100-mile trek all the way around the base of it. We did half of it. We plan to do half. We plan to start in Chamonix, France, and then in Courmayeur, Italy, and then take a gondola back over the mountain. And that's what our plan was. And we had an amazing time. We had an amazing trip. There were so many unexpected things, though, we didn't foresee happening. Number one is, it was hard. It was difficult. I just thought like walking around the base of a mountain was going to be kind of like paved trails, just checking her out. It was like every day we had to like go up like crazy elevation and plummet back down to the valley. The next day, crazy elevation, plummet back down. I think the hardest day we almost gained 5,000 feet of elevation in one day going up. And the second we got there, we went straight down to the valley to just look back up again the next day and just go, boom. It was so difficult, physically demanding, really challenging. And there are times where I looked at Heather and I'm just like, thanks for coming on my dream trip, man. Well, this is awesome. This is so fun. Smell yourself. This is amazing. Wow. So with two backpacks on our back, a tent and some gear, we headed off to Europe, and we got there and didn't anticipate how difficult it was going to be. The second thing is we didn't anticipate what the weather was going to be like. Last time I had been to Europe, I was in college, and it was like too hot. It was amazing. It was just like, get us out of here. This place is so stinking hot. So the first day we get ready for the Tour de Mont Blanc. We wake up to, it's like lightning, our tent's shaking early in the morning, and we're like, ay, here we go. Okay, Tour de Mont Blanc, so exciting. And that day it rained, poured down rain on us the entire day, and we had to gain 3,000 feet of elevation in the pouring rain. This is what we look like at the top of that. There we are. And I want to point out my wife's beautiful smile. Those of you that know Heather know that she's got to be like one of the most positive people on the planet. One of the most amazing people on the planet. But she can be honest and vulnerable with me. I'm her husband, and she never complained a single time on the entire trip. We get to the top of this. We've been hiking on a dirt road all the way to the top of this, and it's pouring down rain. We get to the top. This is I forget what crossing they called it, and we head back down the mountains and keep going through the valleys. This next picture looks like nothing special. This next picture You can't really see it because it's not that bright, but this is the first time in 48 hours that we even saw the sun. So the sun is like right up there. We saw it for like 9 minutes, and then it set over the mountain, and we were done seeing the sun. Like we saw the sun for 8 minutes in like 48 hours. In that moment, we were like, it's glorious, the sun, soak it in. Oh, it's like we were castaways on an island or something. It was amazing. So we get down to the bottom of that valley. We camp at a farm in France where they make cheese, and we just camp out in the thing. And in that morning, we wake up again. We thought, we saw the sun. I think this is our moment. I think this is it. And then we wake up again. Thunder showers. It's just like thunder, lightning. It's raining, and we're like, oh man. And day after day, we're just like, wow. And we for 4 days, this mountain that we're supposedly hiking around, we never saw because it was covered in clouds the entire time. You know what it's like. I mean, Mont Blanc is the same height as Rainier. And you know what? If you've ever been to the national park, you can if you can see Rainier, take a picture, because you can drive around a corner and go, it's covered in clouds now. It's just like its own weather system. So we get to the bottom there, and the only thing at this point that's giving us any kind of like, we can do it, we've got hope, we can do it, is a little app on my phone called the Weather app. And on that weather app was a little yellow circle with some triangles around it that told me somewhere in the forecast, this was all going to end, and there was going to be sun. And what kept us getting up going, okay, I can go through another summit and down, because I know out there, they're telling me it's going to change. There's going to be sun. That morning we pack up the tent. We start heading up the elevation, going to the tallest elevation that we've been, up to 7,500 feet. Elevation, and it starts to sprinkle on us. We get to high enough elevation, and literally the wind starts blowing, and it's a blizzard. It's snowing on us for 2 straight hours. It's snowing on us at the top of this pass. You can see on the sign that we got to in this next picture, it's just 40-mile-an-hour winds. The snow is just pummeling this rock. And I'm looking at my wife going, don't you love the trips I pick? Isn't this amazing? It's snowing in August. I mean, we're hiking up these alpine hills. There's beautiful wildflowers just out everywhere, and snow. Snow getting to the top right there. We're at the top of the French and Italian border. We get over the top. We finally crest into Italy. The wind just dies down just enough to give us enough relief. That night, it's so cold. Heather only has a bag that goes down to like 32 degrees. And I'm like, it's snowing. Let's not test your sleeping bag. And so we stay in a refuge that's up in the mountains, this old chalet. And they give us dinner, and we stay in the bunkhouse just to get a little relief from the tent. And but this whole time we're just like, I can't. It's snowing. It's August. It's in August, and we're getting snowed on. Like what? We could be in Hawaii right now, and we're getting snowed on in August. But that little yellow circle with those yellow triangles around it just said, one day it tells us it's going to change. Everything's going to change. And then that morning, Heather wakes up before me, and she looks outside, and she sees a color we hadn't seen in a long time. Blue. The sky. We saw the sky, and we wake up that morning at that refuge, and we get to see the Alps for the first time, freshly covered in snow. They had no snow on them when we had arrived in the plane. Now they're freshly covered in snow. That we got to experience that. And then that whole day we hiked our last stretch all the way through Italy to Courmayeur, through this valley, as Mont Blanc is up on the left. And we get to hike all the way through the valley, take the gondola back over to Chamonix, France, and wrap up our tour de Mont Blanc. And I take you through our little exciting trip, all to say that sometimes in life, you think one thing's going to happen. You dream one dream, students, and then you get to college, and it doesn't go like you thought. Then you get married, and you go, okay, marriages work. Okay, it's not like Disney said. It's tough. It's really tough. And then you have children, and they're so cute when they're little. And then they come up with their own ideas, and they make decisions on their own, and it's difficult, parents, right? It's tough. And they love you through it all. And your itinerary can say this is going to be amazing, like your life, and all of a sudden, it changes. And there's one thing in our horizon as Christ followers. There's one thing in the forecast that says one day Jesus will come back, and he'll make all things new. In the forecast, we could continue to walk and endure and still have hope, because one day in the forecast, we know Jesus is going to come back. It's all going to be healed. It's all going to be restored. Those broken relationships, that family, those dreams, and he's going to redeem it all. And heaven's going to collide with earth, and everything will be made new. That's why we can continue to hope. That's why love never loses hope, because in the forecast, all things are made new, and love wins. Paul continues to go on and says, love never loses faith. His faith is unshakable. Jesus never lost faith. Never lost it in his pursuit of us. On the flight home, I saw a movie that's been out for a little bit now, but saw for the first time Hacksaw Ridge. And it's a violent movie from World War II, but it tells the amazing story of Desmond Doss, who was through a circumstance of his childhood and of growing up in a violent home filled with alcoholism and a dangerous home, he decided to be a conscientious objector in World War II, which was really kind of unheard of in that day. He chose not to carry a weapon. I don't want to give all the movie away if you haven't seen it, but there are very specific reasons in his childhood and his upbringing, the reason why he would not carry a weapon into the battlefield. And he was a medic. And they were to take Hacksaw Ridge, and he was a medic, and the amazing story that takes place in that scene on the battlefield. But leading up to that scene, when he's standing upon his convictions and standing upon what he believes, he was attacked by his own countrymen, by his own platoon. He was basically condemned, and they wanted to kick him out of the military because he wouldn't carry an arm. And I'm not trying to make a distinction between whether someone should or whether someone shouldn't. The thing that was so powerful is to see this man stand upon his faith. And even when his convictions were attacked, he chose to stand upon what he believed was right. That his faith wasn't shaken. It was a powerful story. It's one of those moments where you're like, I'm headed home on the plane, and I don't mean to be like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I'm going, like, I don't want to be embarrassed because I'm crying next to like some stranger on the plane. Powerful story about someone standing upon their convictions and not losing their faith. And I think it's why Paul writes this in 2 Corinthians 4. He says, that's why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So don't look at the troubles we can see now. We rather fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see, they'll last forever. They'll last forever. And love never loses faith. And today, if your circumstances of life are kind of spiraling out of control and the hope that you once had is really feeling kind of lost and shaky, stand firm to your faith. That I can't see a way out. I don't see the answers, but I'm going to trust that God sees the way out. That God has the answers, and I can walk with him, and he can endure with me through every single circumstance. I'm going to ask the band to come. We're going to wrap up and sing tonight. Sing before we wrap up this morning. But the final thing that Paul says is that love never gives up. Love never gives up. Jesus never gives up. You see, there's this moment in the Gospels where Jesus is in the garden just before being taken to trial and being taken to the cross. And he has this moment of vulnerability where he says, God, if there's any way you can change the story, change it. If there's any way this script can be rewritten, would you rewrite it? Would you get the eraser out and kind of change the script? But he decides to be obedient and says, but not my will, but yours be done. And even in a moment of vulnerability where Jesus says, it would sure be nice for the circumstances of my life right now to change, I'm not going to give up. Because love never gives up. Love never loses hope. It never loses faith, and it always endures through every circumstance. One of the most famous stories in the Bible is a story about the prodigal son. About a son who chooses to kind of abandon the values and really kind of the hopes and dreams of his parents and his family, and chooses to write his own story and takes his inheritance, heads off, chooses his own life of destruction, squanders it all, and finds himself with nothing. He finds himself in this moment where all of a sudden he realizes, I would be better off at home being one of my father's servants than how I'm living right now. And so he decides to pick himself up, humble himself, and go back home and beg his father if he could just serve as one of his servants. I think one of the most beautiful moments in the Bible is by this story that Jesus told. And Jesus tells the story and he says, and while he was a still long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. We think about that son has gone off. It was a large inheritance. I don't know how much time it would take to squander all of it, but he'd been gone a while. And you get this image that, and while he, the son, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. The way I picture it is that the father would come out to the front porch of his house, of his property, and he would look. Maybe he'd do it multiple times a day. Maybe this is the moment. Maybe he's coming home today. Maybe now was the time in which he decided that he'd be welcomed back with open arms. And this is the image of the Father. Jesus is giving us the image of the good Father towards us. That while we were long off in our own lives of destruction, God our Father kept coming out to the front porch and looking and saying, maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is the day. Maybe this is the time. And the Father never gave up, never lost hope, never lost faith, believing that my son one day will return. And when he does, when my daughter returns, and when she does, I'm going to embrace her. I'm going to kiss her. And we're going to throw a party. And maybe that's you today. Maybe today's your day that Father sees you a long way off. It's time to come home. And there's arms wide open because love never gives up. Love never loses faith, never loses hope, and it endures through every circumstance. And whatever you're going through right now, I know a lot of your stories. I know some of the things that just happened this week. I know some of the stories that are happening. And I know some of the heartache that you're walking through and some of the fears that you have and the doubts and wondering, is this all going to work out? Is there any hope for restoration, for healing, for change, for salvation? And today, because of Jesus, not because I'm asking you to roll up your sleeves or to grit your teeth or to figure it out, but because Jesus is here, he is with us, he is for us, we can grab a hold of hope because Jesus grabbed a hold of hope. We can grab a hold of faith because Jesus grabbed a hold of faith, and we can endure our circumstances. Why? Because Jesus is right here, enduring it with us. He is a good and faithful God. Love is a person. Stop searching. It's found in Jesus today. And the good Father is still on the porch, looking a long way off, seeing all of us come home. And today we just like to say, for those of you who are making that decision today, welcome home. We're excited to have you here. Would you stand to your feet this morning? I want you to know something today. God has not given up on you. Regardless of what you've done, regardless of the things that have happened in your life that you go, God must not care about me because why would all of this stuff happen in my life? Regardless of all of that, I want you to hear clearly today, God has not given up on you. You are not a lost cause. He has not turned his back. You're not abandoned. He's not given up on you. He is for you. And today, I just pray that there would be a don't give up inside of every one of us. And what is it that you need to not give up on today as you kind of continue to walk through the circumstances of your life and of your family and of your job, of your dreams, of what life is today? Maybe for some of you, you're like, I need endurance. I need to learn, God, to grow my character so I could endure circumstances of life. Some of you are like, I need hope. I need to understand what true hope is really all about and find my hope in Jesus. My faith needs to be restored, that even though I can't see the future, I can't see the next steps, that God can. And my faith can be put in him. And today, just know that you don't have to give up today. Because some of you feel like that feels like the only option, the only card I got left in the hand is a give up. You don't have to give up today, because God hasn't given up on you. Today is a good day to come home. The Father's excited to open his arms and embrace you and welcome you back home, to give us hope, to give us faith, and to walk with us through all of our circumstances. Let's pray today. Jesus, we just thank you for